Yo, Lisa, Venerable Doma, Cindy, Dave, and everyone else. So, good morning. Just a quick kind of note about our program, maybe. Um, so, um, we are. So, yesterday was the Chakra Samvara series. If you missed that will be eventually uploaded, and you'll be able to catch that after the fact if you couldn't make it yesterday. Um, we are going to have an installment of Vajrayogini next month. I'm not sure exactly on what Saturday, but the main event that I'd like to tell you about is. Sorry, I'm gonna have to check my calendar. It's in June. Uh, June. It's funny, I can't see my calendar downwards, but Dave, what's the Saturday of after June 15th? That'll be June 22nd, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be the 23rd. The 23rd, Geshe will be giving a Green Tara initiation according to the system of Kriya Tantra. So that will be on the 23rd, and it will be local here at the Burlington Public Library. So if you are sort of in Burlington, Hamilton, Oakville, Mississauga, Toronto area, and if you can come in person, please come. But also we will
Buffalo.
have, huh?
Buffalo.
Buffalo, yes. Buffalo, New York, yes. Buffalo, New York is kind of doable, right? You do have to cross the border,
Yeah.
which might take a little bit of time, but it's actually not that far. It's true. For those of you who are sort of in our vicinity, in the sort of southwestern part of Ontario and adjoining parts of, I guess it's Western New York State, please do come. But also for folks who are at home, we will stream this. But Geshe doesn't want it to be posted on Facebook and YouTube, so you really have to sign into Zoom and participate live. The day before that, the Saturday before that, Geshe will give a basic introduction to the Green Tara practice, as well as an introduction to the sadhana. And on the, so Sakadawa, I believe, is the 23rd of this month. Does that take us to Saturday, Dave?
Uh,
Sorry,
20.
it's Thursday. It's Thursday, right?
Yeah.
So
Let me go get the calendar. It's up there.
don't want to misinform people.
Yeah.
Yes, it's Thursday.
It's Thursday. Okay. So the Thursday, and I believe it's at from 8 to 9 in the morning, we will have a sort of something to commemorate the most important day of Sagadawa, which for those of you who are familiar is the birth, enlightenment, and parinabhan, manifesting of the passing away of Lord Buddha. So it's a very important day, also for the multiplication of merits, but it's also a weekday and folks are at work. So we thought to do something to commemorate the occasion, but to keep it kind of short and simple. So Geshe will give the oral transmission, Sutra Recollecting the Three Jewels, the oral transmission of the 7-line prayer, as well as the Barche Lamsel, Clearing Obstacles on the Path prayer for Guru Rinpoche. So, and then we will, depending on how the time goes, there will be Bodhisattva vows. And then depending on how the time goes, we'll see how the time goes and if how much Geshe wants to comment. We may just recite the Sutra Recollecting the Three Jewels together in English. So that is our plan for that holy day. And now I see that we're actually 3 minutes past, so I don't want to take your time with Geshe. So please get yourself a cup of tea or coffee, make yourselves comfortable. I'll invite Geshe down and we'll get started. Thanks for bearing with me. was like a loaded question from Geshe. He's like, so do you have any more organizing that you have to do? And I was like, no, but of course I left the mute on, so. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay, great. And Geshe Tesun.
Yes.
Ya kanga tashi dele.
And can you hear Geshe okay?
Yep.
All right. Then we are okay to get started. And yeah, also we are trying to adjust different things with the sound. So if something is off, let us know. But also, folks who are listening from home on Zoom, if you make sure that you're muted, that also helps the sound quality for everybody. Of course, when we have questions and answers, you're welcome to unmute yourself. Thanks so much. Dosaki.
Oya tachiro kanga tashi dele kanga tane kiwoto tane la lojoto seto kanga ta yajino shirewa yos.
So first of all, Tashi Dele, greetings to all Dharma friends. He hopes that you are well and happy, and also that your studies are going well and that your mind correspondingly is improving.
Ota nganzo nere chine ruruyoso de ate tas pene leva jacheron royato setane page jacheron royato tianda ta nganzo leka chiyores.
So, of course, we are engaged in the task together here to try to establish some vastness within our mind, some vastness within this human brain.
Ota nganzo ane desa de koine ala de yore. Ota nganzo tene lido tene ta kato kanga ane anjo to kanga koige lichire standa. Ta yina yo dela tene tene page ta tene koa to mande deshi puso bachi de yo ita ta dileka chiyores.
So, of course, right now, we are abiding within this abode that we know as samsara. And correspondingly, we have a samsaric body, speech, and sense consciousness, such as the ear consciousness. But we understand that on the basis of our practice, of our cultivation of the teachings, we're trying to give rise to a body that is beyond samsara, one that is untouched by samsara.
Ota tandiji za tani koro page li koro koine za ji yina yo ta diga shawa chenbo che to yo ba ya chenbo chi res.
And there's another paradox here which bears mentioning, which is that although this body is in its nature samsaric, it is actually able to, with cultivation, engage with perfect activities of virtue.
Ota jasi parol koi jasi paro do no ya ta to tji koro do ro go marawas yina yo tjinda wo chi res.
Yes, so the body is not exactly like a boat, but we can think of it in terms of the analogy, right? That it's a boat which allows us to get across this ocean of samsara, right? That we'll leave behind once we reach the other shore.
Ota tani shi wo tomba su tndri go koka ya poti ka ta ni ko ma de a sani ya zo ka ju na wo ya.
And so there's kind of like, I don't want to say a scolding. What's the word for that? Is admonition a good word? Yeah, I think an admonition from the holy beings recognizing, right, the freedoms and the richness of this human rebirth. Do not waste it.
Ota ngaro su go tani suji ne zu te ta zo nganzo cheba shesa ge jenda wo de ngaro su nga sa kuza sa ta to sa go phumbo nga jo ya res.
So one of the things that we want to look at through the lens of the Buddhist teachings and sort of be able to analyze, to deconstruct, is that we call the I or the self. And here we could nominally say the I or the self posited in dependence upon the five aggregates, for example.
Ota phumbo nga ga no lo se ju sa de nga zo leka chike ne nga chungwa ro go ta tunga mombo yo nda manda ja to mombo yo res.
And so then connected with what we call my body and my mind, in particular with my mind, we can divide this in a presentation of what are known as the 52 mental factors.
Ota tunu ne tani nga zo kuza ge da je tela ni jo ya res.
And so within that list of the 52 mental factors, there are two which are said to form a particularly important basis for the designation of the self, or that we call the I.
Ota ni ma ni chi ja ya de ona misa se ju mombo yo ba no ni chi ja ya de je se kare res.
But one might ask, out of all of those 52 mental factors, when we speak about the designation of this I or self, why are two of them singled out?
Ota ni te nga zo ta leka ya po ma chen ka di na kwa ya page je zo chil no ya res.
It's because these two, if we don't kind of harness them or utilize them properly, they can actually act as the main forces that keep us spinning, that keep us circling within samsara or cyclic existence.
다 단단한 좀 이거 도야 다 첨부 잡아 있는 뭐게 뭐죠 내가 소파 다 거의 그녀다 뭐지데 무산다부터 좋은 이때라 되는 시와시 워레스.
We could also say that the problems within samsara, those that are so apparent that we can see in this world, such as the wars, the conflicts, and so forth, they are also very much propelled, connected with these two.
어떤 이때 워낙 가르래 잘라봐 이나 빈봉가 있는 고사기도 하죠. 아니 좋아도 아니 드시니 보다레스.
Okay, so what down dishi ale di ngapshinga ni nangla yomare pumbo ngagi nangla ro.
나중 아는 신이 때 말아와.
Suni.
좋아도 드시니 보다.
Dishini. Oh, then the pumbo ngala yori ngachingi ni ningala
Yeah,
yori.
yeah.
So these two, which are feeling and discrimination, when you hear those, I think some of you will recognize that those are within this list of the 52 mental factors. They're also in a list of 5. Does anybody, if you can think of what those 5 are? It's the 5 skandhas or aggregates, right? Feeling and discrimination are within those as well.
하고서 변화 치기 다 보게 내서로 조사하시라 몇 개서라면 고사 리니어레스. 리지 때는 소위 된다라 봐. 그거 다 보게 나문다 내서라 되는 거 지코노야레스.
So we could say that within the different types of beings or persons that are kind of connected with these two, feeling and discrimination, there are 2 types. Those who are primarily driven by feelings and those who are more driven or affected by discrimination.
하고서래 어떤 야가도 누가도 어떤 조조 바지 야와시네 차츠 소위 빈보 초자게 야지세지 대지레스.
Parjaya Gimsenchi.
매미 좋아대 단다 조지 고사기도 하절 줘야 돼.
Yeah.
소위 된다라 단고 코네 뭐지더네 고할 거도 야레스.
Yapodang yapoma yempa yewache yanglap so antin so nyamdu kandes drogeres ngasa bomendu.
시시워서 좋아 어가 좋아 대화 야보지 그거 야래. 좋아 등아 그거 야 말에 근데 내지 주주질라 되는 거 코네 고할 거도 야레스.
So those who are kind of primarily driven by feeling, out of these two of feeling and discrimination, we can see that it's very connected with, this gives me a pleasant or a good feeling, and this gives me an unpleasant feeling or a feeling of suffering, and then they are kind of driven to accumulate karma and so forth by those experiences.
다 시도도 그거를 봐서 이나요 노아 간가요 저 tel라되는 거 와서 다 된다고 말해스.
So of course, we need these, right? We need feelings and to work with those. So
야 좋아라 되네 노아 슈침보 간가요 좋아라 좋아 대화도 등하라 되는 거 알아왔어.
But we have to understand that these pleasant and unpleasant feelings are driven primarily by interacting with things on the level of the appearances, on the level of appearance.
다요 다 좋아한 걸로 로슈 제법 다 매세는 뭐도 다 디젠다 지대 로주 때서 여기 리지서는 뭐도 아니 오치 로주 제겐다고도 다 근데 이나나 오저 다 배지 저다 실을 배지 내야가래 내 두가래 내시
Geshe Nyogtra
야야
so Churi Latene.
오쇼리 라테네 진대 야가래 지드가래 다 근데 조조 라테네 야레스.
So then the next one is this discrimination, right? And so discrimination is generally seen as more positive, but it can also fall into negativity, particularly among those who are practicing religious traditions, especially if they're a little bit less studied. One can fall into these kind of discriminations or sectarian attitudes of my religion is better than this, or this particular lineage is incorrect and this is correct, and so forth. So discrimination, this aggregate or mental factor of discrimination can also cause problems.
하고서 다 근데 지장한 저다 매일이 니도아스 제가 용어 대사가 요다 용어 대사가 시 니와레스.
Yeah. So from this perspective, right, we can think that beings are primarily driven by this feeling and discrimination, and they're more sort of inclined to one or another. And from what we've just shared, then both can act as the basis of experiencing a lot of difficulties and perpetuating samsara.
어다요 사모투만이네 제바시바 이나요 고자가 아주 분봉가요네 제바시아 다 자치 뭐지 알아왔어.
And so when we are trying, for example, also to understand a profound emptiness, we understand that it's very important to seek the basis of designation of the self or the I within the 5 skandhas or aggregates.
어다 맞체가 놀러 다음 가서도 멀린데라 다 요다가 사용 그 용도 간디지래도 어다 요다 매방용사 용도 간디지래도 따사고 시
And also we can think of in our life on the broader level, how do these two connect with the places in the world that are in perpetual problems and conflicts, and how might these two connect with where there are less problems?
야야. 하고서 어다 던지지 자 어다 어다게 야 평범하들이 이면 저다 가서 셀냐니 템볼 때 빠지야 보체카레스.
이닝한서 부모가 차상 라마서 알아고.
텔라는 저거 와서 계속 가봐.
So keeping it so the 5 skandhas so the 5 aggregates or skandhas are something that we should know, right? As Buddhists we should know these and we should be able to keep them in our mind. But I said to Geshe, we didn't actually say what they were. That's what that little interaction was about. So probably some of you know them, but for those of you who don't, form, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are the 5 skandhas or aggregates. Sometimes translated as the 5 heaps, but you don't see it translated that way so much these days.
어달로이 인력은 제자와 세계로 심어두는 다 단다 깨자티시요레스 제비 자와 접어도 제비 자와 고아바르지 제와 제사
Ale.
자와 될라 핀보 초와 돼도 대신이 보더래.
So Vasubandhu, in his text on the Abhidharma, or Buddhist metaphysics, he said very clearly that the quarrels or the strife within this world is connected to these 5 aggregates, in particular to these 2 of feeling and discrimination.
어제비 자와 접어도 거의 제시르지시 세준노리 초와도 nd시 루시 핀보자 니데 로스 자바레스.
Yeah, so
yeah,
so sorry, Geshe has obviously he's memorized a lot of Vasubandhu's commentary. I haven't, so he didn't give it to me ahead of time. If someone knows, please cut and paste. So basically it is saying that the root of samsara, gonda korwe tsawa karere? Yeah. So the root of quarrel and strife within samsara, out of these 52 mental factors, is driven primarily by feeling and discrimination. The gist of the verse is something like that. So we can see this clearly in the world, on the world level, can't we? The problems between countries and so forth, how they may be driven by feeling and discrimination. And also all of the sort of domestic strife, right? The family disagreements and so forth are also in many ways driven by these two. And also these feeling and discriminations, for us on the individual level, they're very important because they are primarily what will drive us in terms of our actions, which determines whether we accumulate karma, which is wholesome or unwholesome, positive or negative. So this is our basis of discussion and debate, and as we kind of explore these topics, they're important topics, but also we should have a sort of a playful attitude, right, that it's something really interesting. So we can challenge this concept, right, that there is this I. Sorry, I'm seeing a lot of messages popping up, which always makes me worry. Is our sound okay? When a lot of messages pop up, we are okay? All right. So when we look at the solidity of this I or this self, which is kind of seemingly something very stable, we can deconstruct this by thinking that it is a self which is designated on the basis of these 5 aggregates or skandhas. And so also, as we engage with this, we want this motivation, which is very vast, a motivation which thinks, may I be able to lead all sentient beings on the path towards greater love and towards greater compassion.
어다 던지 소마누지 다 템보지도 야보지로 다 소화당 요 좀비토니 다 노이스.
And so in order for that to be able to come out well, I will, with single-pointed concentration, make the praises and requests of blessings to the holy beings. So we'll begin our prayers.
이거 텐도 마스터도 그래.
Yeah.
tumbai jomden de ba da jomba yonda bar zobe sanje je ba da shazu demba de war Chonden de je ba da jomba yonda ba zobe sonje je ba dan shazu demba dewa she ba jite chemba shebu de kalo jorwa lana me ba la da mi namgi demba sonje chonden de be jawa shaja do ba la chaze lo che da jasu ji Tumbai chomden de deje sheba da chomba yonda ba zobe sonje sheba dan shasu demba dewa sheba jide jemba shebu dewe kalo gyowa lana meba lado minongi demba sonje chomden de bejawa shaja duba la chaselo chede jasu chi do a short mandala. Mendala gono yada yam Sonje jedon zoje chenam la janjo bardu dane jazo je dagi chenyen gibe sonam ge jola benjir sonje jobar sho sonje jedon zoje chenam la janjo bardu dane jazo je dagi chenyen gibe sonam ge jola benjir sonje jobar sho sonje
Shidon Tsugi Chinam Lai Changchu Badu Dani Kyasu Chi Dagi Chinin Gibe Tsunam Ji Chola Penjiro Sanje Choba Risho.
뭐야 다 도마텔 다 그런거 니까라 어떤 가로서 강가로로 어느 중에 강격에 대해 벌써 주바지 저가래 대저바셔 발라 알레 나세야 손지를 만도 받아 자송하지 저도면
So then connected with this motivation, which is important to establish in the beginning, we want to be able to achieve in the best possible way the welfare of ourselves, but also the welfare of all others. And we understand that we will not be able to do this until ourself will actualize the state of complete and perfect enlightenment.
소소소 자치 못 쓰고 요나이 나세다 자치 못 쓰고 요나요 대라요 다 다봐요 아쇼 같이 뭐레스.
So also this is very much connected with our self-compassion, right? If we have genuine concern for ourselves, genuine care for ourselves, we understand that the best way to achieve our own welfare is through that ultimate liberation, supreme liberation.
다스면 연인 로 용조데 소소 녀레 디어레 대지게 대퍼스 주바지 버게 대시 야보지 잡발라야 다 손질 만도 다만도 소마지 그 야레스.
And also to think all of those sentient beings who are not separate, right? Who are unbearably close to us. We want to be able to lead them to the supreme state of liberation as well. And the only way that we can do that effectively is by achieving the supreme liberation of Buddhahood or complete enlightenment.
손지에서는 연다지 세계 야마레스. 된다 시용조 먹게야 강가 하고 살아. 파주하게 강가 시용조도 파주하 도봐. 예때 치총게 강가 총게지라 다 손지 메다 말레스.
So when we talk about a Buddha, we can say that a Buddha is one who has completely been able to get rid of all faults, any trace of negativity, as well as to bring forth all necessary qualities, all positive qualities and positive karma. One who has completely abandoned faults and has brought forth magnificent qualities is a Buddha.
어다는 때문에 다때 맞지 찔려 잡아 이나 된리게 내서 가세요 보시나. 어떻게 보면 알아봐지 그 알아봤어.
And so if we have that as sort of our long-term goal, then connected with how much progress we make, even getting incrementally closer to that, that will also make us happier, more satisfied in our daily lives.
다 될때는 로 마노와지도 다 로야슈지 님면은 로토메아이자 대니티 다 녀는 시다가 야레스.
And so then in order to be able to reach that goal, however, we need a path which is both complete and unmistaken. In the absence of that, we will not be able to reach the destination.
다 될 알에 녀를 세 좀마도 류좀마치 그 달리야 같이 먹고근데 데이터 대좀마서 이 섬이도네 대셔.
And so in order to be able to reach that, to cultivate that path properly, we need a mind that is clear and relaxed and a body that is kind of alert and fresh. And so we'll take a moment to kind of clear the winds, to settle the body and mind in a state of peace.
손사 강가 요가도 두가 강가 파자니 다세 tun용으로 레레 되기 있어마치.
So putting aside all thoughts, whether wholesome or unwholesome, let us just rest in the character of the fundamental mind, which is that neutral equanimity.
처음에 저 노도를 지르바 제타판 노칼은 자야와 노야로요 손바지.
We can also think any of the unhelpful feelings or discursive thoughts, perhaps unwholesome, that are disturbing us. These just settle into that fundamental nature in the same way that a rainbow slowly dissolves into the sky.
류츠마서야 그때도 슈 쳔보 레레 지니치 테마송 데즈가파 슈 쳔보 나보 테마송.
So in order to kind of purify that wind element, as we mentioned, we're going to do a cultivation using the breath. So basically, we do 3 steps 3 times, which is we breathe in deeply, we hold it for some time, and then we exhale even more deeply.
좀 maybe 초아도 르도가가 샬로바다 그 주사메바 노가라 야송 소마로.
On the basis of this meditation, any unsteady or still breath, any unhelpful thoughts, any disturbing feelings are completely cleared away, just like that rainbow dissolved into the sky.
세용아도 만다와스 드니 싸와도 리용아도 만다와 용한다고 다 그용바 레레차송 소마.
So the mind and the body feel different than before. The mind, whereas before it was foggy, it is now clear. The body, whereas it may have felt heavy, it now feels light.
테니 세테다 미여보 롱긴드는 나가라 지즈도마 아니 까비그 여보 진행내려 선바지 여보시다.
So on the basis of this and in the empty space in front of us, we should imagine as our object of focus for this meditation, a beautiful image, a clear image of white Tara in front of us in the sky.
마르소라 뒤년비 고니크타 이제 좀 롱게마 마르소다 로아르 주요 센제 유졸 바즈이데요 소마로.
And we should think, pleased with our motivation for calling her, that this white Tara gazes with loving affection not only upon ourselves, but upon all sentient beings who we can imagine surrounding us.
손지치 공부 마도 받았다. 샤스 때문에 선바지 지스도마 첼.
And think that until I achieve enlightenment, I will sincerely, continuously go for refuge to Venerable Aryatara.
센지 우주가 대대하게 지었더니 지스도마 체치가 다 저토바서이 소마로.
And think, in order to be able to actualize a state where I can really effectively accomplish the benefit of all beings, on the basis of this refuge, may I also be able to eventually actualize the state of Venerable Aryatara myself.
유스 도마요 투년비 토네타 투가네 게제 테게제 도년데 드제게제 차반바는 가로서 로와 요주 아니 리지강에 센지강에 파셔니 아니 야 리지 네르게소 소마로.
So think, being pleased with us from Venerable Tara's holy body, limitless light rays and nectars emanate, and these fall upon us and all the assembled sentient beings like rain, clearing away all of our physical suffering, clearing away all of our mental suffering and confusion.
칼레 치페네 룽기 쇼와데 마룽기 닐레마 슈소 소마로.
Jizendrumala.
야
And then think, finally, Venerable Tara, white Tara, wish-fulfilling wheel, she descends to the spot just at our crown. And as she melts into us, imagine that we receive perfectly all of her blessings of holy body, holy speech, and holy mind. So we'll pause there. So that was the preliminary meditation, motivation. So all sentient beings, whether we think about them actualizing the state of Tara, of Chenrezi Avalokiteshvara, of Mañjuśrī, although those manifestations, may have their uniqueness, actually the path that one needs to travel and actualize to get to those three is the same. So there's different ways of thinking about Venerable Tara. One of the ways is thinking of her as the enlightened embodiment of the wind element. And because she is in the nature of the wind element, her particular characteristic is that she is swifter than other deities in terms of being able to grant help and realization.
Yeah,
Yumji. And it's not particularly related to our topic today, but Geshe just wanted to share that, as we reach enlightenment, in many systems it describes our ordinary elements, so earth, fire, wind, water, as transforming into the 4 dakinis. The 4 dakinis, or the 4 mothers. He said, actually, in yesterday's Chakra Samvara, he was supposed to mention something about this, but he neglected it, so we're getting a little bit of it today. And of course, this transformation happens in relation to, not with this coarse body so much, but when we have kind of reached the realization of that subtle body. And it is said also that as we draw closer to enlightenment and the subtle body increasingly manifests, right, that those 5 skandhas or aggregates that we talked about, these actually become or transform into the nature of the 5 dhyani Buddhas. So that's one reason why we say you don't necessarily need to seek for the Buddha outside of yourself. The Buddha is within yourself, or the Buddhas are within yourself. So this is one reason why we could think about like that. Yeah. And so from those kind of scriptural encouragements that, you don't need to seek the Buddha outside, the Buddha is within yourself. Some philosophical schools think that we actually are already Buddha, but perhaps just don't know it yet. Not saying Buddha. Sorry, I'm saying Buddha today because in His Holiness's teaching on Friday, right, Tenzin Sepak was translating, and he always says Buddha in the really Sanskrit way, which I think sounds so nice. So if you think, did Kedrup have too much coffee this morning? No, I just thought, I like to. Geshe said, don't waste too much time on frivolity. Sorry. So we need to study and practice a path which is unmistaken, but also complete, right? This complete is very important. And we can be assured that it is complete when we practice the paths of the 3 scopes that were mentioned last time, right? The small scope, middling scope, and great scope. And actually, these 3 scopes are kind of a table where the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have set out a banquet of realization that is ready for us to eat. So there's no point in us kind of sitting back, not walking towards it and saying that we feel hungry.
that means 따도 통근도 와서 너 집을 따와 이나 단다이나 뭐뭐지 너 집을 거는 그냥 가시 지준이라 아니 단다 지녀래서 아주 잘해 되대요.
And so actually this formulation of the three scopes is really important because it allows us to practice the teachings of the Buddha holistically. Otherwise, what could happen is if we just look at the sutras themselves without this rubric, we could just be looking at kind of one tiny aspect within the sutra and only cultivating that.
어단에 여보도래 때는 내서 차송와서 마주나 어다레니 뉴니지라테는 거다도 로토고 말와스.
Which is good, of course, engaging with the sutra is good, but the danger is that if one is just focusing on that one element without at least a general awareness of the path in its complete form, right? One can miss out on being able to cultivate realization.
어땅아로서 로타도 로도도 제발 로타 동비가는데 그거 이비가는데 그거 선비가는데 그거 제 도쇼는데 그거래서 다다다다 유아래스.
So just we could think that like these three scopes actually, although we're a great scope practitioner, we need to actually train in all three of them. We can think about this as going to school, right? We start in elementary, go to secondary, and then maybe go to post-secondary. It's a little bit like that.
너 강가 짜치 뭐 레베스는 레테네 이나 너 강가 따되는 간도 차서 뭐 세진 루 자고 말아.
So are the sutras, the collected discourses of the Buddha, precious? Of course they are precious, but especially if we think about the time that most of us have, would we even be able to finish reading every single sutra ever written in this lifetime? That's going to be unlikely that most of us would be able to do even that. So the essence of all of those sutras, of those collected discourses, is contained within these teachings of the stages on the path, and that is something truly wonderful and amazing. So please, for those of you who have it, and there is a link on our website, by the way, for those of you who have it, please turn to Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment by Atiśa. Geshe is having a doubt that you can hear us properly. Can you hear us properly? You can? Okay, good. Oh, so in terms of what we've covered, actually we've already covered the parts of the text which give kind of a brief summary of the paths of the three scopes. And so at this point, the text kind of goes into a more extensive explanation of those. So we could think of how were the three scopes summarized in the earlier part of the text. It was given as like, what is the measure? In other words, where has one reached to be said to be of small scope, middling scope, and great scope? So in order to kind of remember this information, which Geshe is really encouraging you to do, you should be able to say that there are three scopes, right? And that's the person of, here it says inferior, but we can say small capacity, middling capacity, and great capacity. But if you wanted to kind of flesh this out and get it a little bit more solid in your mind, you could say the stages of the path common to beings of a small capacity, common to beings of a middling capacity, and of beings of a great capacity. You'll notice that word common only appears in the small and middling, not in the great.
다 셴바도 니지 야보데 다 템보 뇨래 지게요. 다 니주고 셴바 타발 로야게 다 뇨래 템보 지게요나 시부 중요한 매 달아 주야래.
So, how do you know that you are no longer a being of the small scope, of the small capacity? If you are able to have a stable abiding within renunciation or definite emergence, and if you are able to bring forth with a measure of effectiveness the minds of love and compassion, we could say that you are no longer a being of the small scope.
다 시부 중요한 메사 릴라고요 말다. 시부 중요한 알레드는 레야데 시부 중요한 자라바이나 만원이 뭐요아쇼 뭐 정보 이 더버지 차로 야레스.
But actually, let us not denigrate those, and this word here, that's why I don't like this word, inferior individuals. Let us not denigrate those of the small scope, because those who are truly abiding by the ethics of the small scope, amongst the vast population of human beings, there already be a standout person, an exceptionally ethical and good person as compared to others.
다 된데 되겠는데 뭐 되는 다 해라. 아스카니도 간도 좀더 다 대화 전부는 이도 지셀리라 그래서.
So we really have to check to see where we are in terms of evaluating our mind. It's easy to say Mahayana, love, and compassion, but whether we're really there or not, that's something else, right?
어떤 간도 때 간가 뭐 정보지도 뭐 여라지도 다 비도 보서야지 잘하러 왔어.
But these teachings on the initial scope, right, they are making us a stand-up type of person, right? An honest and respectable person. And therefore, they're very important.
어떤 뭐 비도 보지 처한데도 뭐도 다 소소소 치다야래 맞아 하고 말아.
And in terms of whether you're a fundamentally good person or not, that's also not something that anyone else can tell you, right? That's only something that we can determine for ourselves by examining our own conduct.
다 던지지에서 시부 중에서 그 리라버지래면 두었어.
So this is just to bring home the point that even the stages of the small scope, or what they say the inferior practitioner in this translation, that's not something so easy, something to be dismissed.
다 누왕이네 집에 비도 보지 이나는 다시 우중에 때라면 렌데 여보 수기지래 거야. 다 때는 뭐 좀 쉬워지 용 거로 왔어.
And so really also as we go into the middle scope and so forth, we talk about going for refuge, becoming a Buddhist, but really to study and practice correctly as a Buddhist, right? If we're doing that, we'll be paying very close attention to the teachings of the small scope on karma, cause and effect, and living according to that.
별이는 보모 되어 지금 강인의 샤와는 렌데 여보 수기지 샤와쇼 세면로 자기 뭐야 할래야게 내서 했대죠.
So one of the things that is so nice about the older generation of Tibetans is an aspiration that they make, which Geshe thinks is really beautiful, which is from lifetime to lifetime, may I be born as someone who abides by the law of karma, avoiding what is negative, taking up what is positive.
야, 다 디바지. 다 세제 동바 손주 주. 네. 괜찮아.
I don't know where we are. Just a moment. Sorry. Getting on Geshe's nerves a bit today. My apologies. Semchen Tampa Jangchu.
세제 동바 다도 뭔가 로지야. 세제 동바 손주 주. 언데 받자 받대다라. 라마 노지 템바이. 요타 타는 셰바샤.
All right, so we're on verse number 6, which is at the bottom of the English translation, page 4. For these noble beings who desire supreme enlightenment, I shall explain the perfect methods taught by spiritual teachers.
달리라 보면 돼. 세제 동바 손주 주. 세제 동바 손주 주. 내 받자 받대다라. 다 세제잖아. 시도 다 아까서와 시도 손질라요 세요아를 왜서는 세요아를 강가요 안저도 집안하고 다 요아래.
So here we're talking about sentient beings, which sorry, we're sentient. Yeah. So actually, I'm just telling Geshe there's something missing from the translation. For these noble sentient beings is actually how it appears in the Tibetan, and that's important because Geshe is explaining what sentient indicates. So sentient beings indicates possessing mind. So then the question comes up, well, does a Buddha possess mind? The Buddha does possess mind, but a Buddha is not said to be a sentient being. If we just look at the etymology, like of the actual word semchen, it really means like chen is kind of like endowed with, so it really means endowed with mind. So that's possessing mind, we could say. Ladensena?
또 손지도 생제 손지 삼바도 요조를 세요아를 때네 손지 강가 생제 레베스는 말해 됐지 하고 가래스.
So ordinary beings, bodhisattvas, Buddhas, they all possess mind. Despite that, Buddhas are not included in this category of sentient beings.
고조 강가 리니는 로근도와 손제도 세제니지 여와시서 강가 되는 로 사레스.
When we divide beings, this general category of beings, into two, those two categories are simply sentient beings and Buddhas. It's really simple like that.
다로 tani 다 손제 많이 키가 다 손제 선바 옛날에 니 다좀바 옛날에 간디지 먹게 간디지 이나이 단데 senjen으로 요레스.
So, fleshing that out further, what does that actually mean? That means apart from Buddhas, even realized beings such as Bodhisattvas, such as hearers, Shravakas, solitary realizers, Pratyeka Buddhas, they're all included in that category of sentient beings.
다 senje tomba tan데서와 다 tomba 손주 senje tomba 손주 초다 손주 때라 손주는 손주 초세기도 와스. 손주를 가서 쪼들 써요래. 니 되게 손주 루자게 손주 대제게 손주.
So, who desire supreme enlightenment, so this connects with something that was mentioned. There are different types of, the Tibetan word is jangchup, enlightenment. There's the enlightenment of hearers, the enlightenment of solitary realizers, and the enlightenment of complete Buddhas. So this is the third, the enlightenment of Buddhahood.
디소와 다 던디게 다 senje게 남만 뭐야 빨라 당년에 다 비도 아버지나 다 던디게 손주 추 senje 요조게 된도 손주 추 된데 게 지라
Yeah. So here we're also, it's kind of also understanding that there are different beings with different affinities and capacities. But this is mainly dedicated to those noble beings, to those superior beings who are seeking out of different advantages and different kinds of enlightenment, seeking that supreme enlightenment connected with that motivation of it being for all sentient beings.
다 안들 던디게 세제 돈바 다 보게 비도 아버지라 가시게서는 대바침이 리세바 이전에 야자기고 요주레스.
So there will be some who want to define this more precisely here and say that in the context of this verse, those noble or those superior beings, that is actually designated those beings who have who have activated the Mahayana lineage.
대체 리세바데 내면가 디근노네라 가와네지 여기 요레 이지 첨부 가디 도선에 대바침이 리세바사데 고츠바레스.
So what does it mean? What is the measure of having activated the Mahayana lineage? The simple way is to bring this back to the teachings on the 7-point cause and effect instruction for arising bodhicitta. And within those 7 steps, when one has reached the step of having brought forth great compassion, one is said to have activated the Mahayana lineage.
노지는 가서 다 뭐시에 살아와서는 로 메이나레 던로이나레 너는 로와 리투게 센제 요조라 저도 손지그리 차디요레스.
Yes. Yeah. But in terms of possessing the potential of this lineage, what we would call the Buddha nature, merely possessing it, this is something that is shared by all beings, whether human, animal, indeed all sentient beings, at least in some way, possess a parcel of this potential.
아까서라 이나요 다 리요아레 때는 리세바데 릴라워치레면도 와스 고체 도워치레스.
We say they possess the potential, but that is merely possess the potential, because activating that potential is another matter entirely, and that is only something that can be really achieved by those who are quite advanced on the path in their cultivation.
어따 뭐이나 니또 첨부 뽑아 첨부 센제 요조 강이 니 메바저기 세케지 그요 아타 텔리라고 말아왔어.
We need a brave, courageous individual who's really able to abide by this promise that I myself will lead all sentient beings to complete freedom from their problems and the causes of those.
디스와 어따디 다 티니 아니지 첨부 고네라 하서 논도시 디니 손주제 세토서나 대바침비도 손주 세텔 대바침비 유고세기 요레스.
Tekshin Lamgi Juko. Okay. So we're just kind of presenting, Geshe's presenting how all of this is unfolding in terms of these 7-point cause and effect. So one brings forth that great compassion, which Geshe shared is that's activating the Mahayana lineage. Next one has the pure superior intention. And finally, you have the results, the final of those 7 steps, which is bodhicitta. At that moment where bodhicitta is arisen, that is the actual entry to the Mahayana path. One is that has then actually entered the Mahayana path.
야 라마 정가베 로르 쳔보든 리모 가와레 이나요. 너니 공기 고르 주준 주거는 쇼주지세 코나고 너니 와 이나레 너 이나레 대바 쳔보는 주거데 쇼주지세 지보이스.
So Lama Tsongkhapa, he makes a comment in the Lamrim Chemo, the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. Sorry, it's Chemo, on the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, that whether we talk about Mahayana Sutra or Mahayana Tantra, the entry to the actual paths of these, Sutra and Tantra, Mahayana Sutra and Tantra, is the arising of this mind of bodhicitta.
Deswa tao reise badun jugo ko che tore diwas ta ina nyole che tombone che tore brevesene mares pena nganzo senje yuzo le pamba
Okay, going again.
So just
So
say
I lost that.
tewachi mi reise ba sa do tewachi mi jugo to sana ko lela ore ma diwas
Loso.
che tore andro ko diwas.
So really the point that is being made here is that activating the Mahayana lineage and the actual entry into the Mahayana path, these are already realizations that are quite advanced, right? There's something that's going to be achieved by quite a seasoned practitioner.
다 이제 첨부 또 대화 첨부 쇼쇼지 세토 내려 출로 대제 출로세 대야 당가대 동보 들어왔어.
Techen Solam, Teata Gate Gate.
동보.
So when we speak about the 5 Mahayana paths, they're often combined with this mantra from the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, Tayata Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Soha. Gate Tambodhi? So the first Gate within that mantra is the path of accumulation.
This one, 다 tel 사타위 쇼주지 세 요레스.
Sa. So that is said to be the bodhicitta, which is like the earth.
하고서라와 살라테는 가로서 시도도 비 야보 강가 시행 거라와스.
So think about that analogy, right? Earth like bodhicitta. That's a really beautiful image because you have the earth, and that's what allows the flowers and the trees and all of the fruits and vegetables to be able to grow.
다 출로를 리서요 아래서 이거 출로 충분히 전부 써세네.
And of course, it goes more detailed. So within that path of accumulation, there are sort of 3 increments: the small path of accumulation, middling path of accumulation, and the great path of accumulation.
다 동보 쇼지 세토게 출로 충어 이자 코 자자 마체랑 또 멜로도 다 동보네 다다 거로 퍼스토 바지면아.
Yeah.
가시 뇽로요 뇽야요 아래서.
Yeah.
정로요.
So actually within this first step, so that small increment on the path of accumulation, this is actually quite dangerous for the bodhisattva, because if they don't make solid prayers and dedications here, it's actually possible that they will actually fall off the path and kind of become, I confirm this with Geshe, basically they won't be a bodhisattva anymore. They'll lose that bodhicitta aspiration.
다 이나요 로뇽도 그래서 로뇽도요 말이스. 요나 니티나로 루잔다고
있지만. But the paradox is, they fall off the Mahayana path of accumulation, but they still remain on that path of accumulation, except in this case it will be the path of accumulation of either a Shravaka, a solitary realizer, a Pratyeka Buddha, a solitary realizer, or a Shravaka here.
땡 비미 다테 비장가 당안도 지바르선 때는 저거 말어 말이 된다 안조 이나요 세야보 지냐니 되나 마할레비노다 사워체도 티세르 워케세 시기슈소나 세트뇨로야 요아라 된다고 저러고
So it's a little bit like, to give kind of an everyday example, we can think about how we're affected by certain things. Like, we might bring forth a really positive mind and be in a really great mood, but then if we find that we have to spend our day with a very difficult person, that initial aspiration and our mood, they can degenerate, right?
하고서와 다 로베 쇼롱 티바제데 가중하면서 주시에서 임바스.
And so the great Acharya Cholang. So there's Dharmakirti. Who's the other one? There's Chudrak and Cholang. Maybe Venerable Tender knows. Does anyone know who Cholang is? I always forget his name.
Dignaga.
Thank Thank you so much. Yes, Dignaga. So this is actually what happened to Dignaga. Choklamurwa.
Yeah.
He lost that original aspiration.
퀄리티 바제 디슈네 다 마할레비더니 파 가제 내지 아버테나 드네 파 콘트로 사치는 두야면 드리코 세주 좋아서
So he encountered a kind of an obstacle, and with someone who was trying to help, and no matter what he did, there was kind of like no improvement, and so eventually he was like almost in danger of falling off that aspiration.
까디디 체마가 띠지 짜친 못되는 거주 잘해서 지니.
And at that time, he had actually already begun his very important treatise on valid cognition. He had written down a couple of words.
다 배도 요사 말해서는 드네 거 세주 전에 도대 지니 주사가 도지 하라 와.
도지게래.
대노로 와요는 살마 가디서는가 존지세 바자기 히스.
And he threw up the slate, because at that time they wrote the initial text on the slate, right? He threw up that slate that he was writing on, and he said, when this falls to the ground and crashes, I forego bodhicitta. I give up my bodhicitta.
하고서라와 드네 도대 마유는 거름이 전에 드네사다 마도 마치는 사야메 군조지 짓다 그런 좀 거기서 도대 수도 말해서.
But he threw up that slate, but it never came crashing to the ground. So he was kind of wondering what happened, and he looked up and he saw that Venerable Mañjuśrī, the Buddha of wisdom, was holding on to it.
더 저런 데서 되냐 드리지 세주 좋아 그거 말해.
점배영.
다 좋아 그거 말해. 저런 데마 유대마 여보 소만노지 조쇼도 마고빠는데 배도 자체 모는 거요.
And Mañjuśrī said, don't be discouraged. No, you don't have to give up this aspiration. And if you continue writing this commentary in the future, it will be something greatly beneficial to beings.
다 드리게 된다고 로지 몸버래서 다 가시 오더니 이거야 말 배도만 로키오요 알았어.
So there are many kind of stories like these in various scriptures, and in some cases, right, there's some kind of intervention or something happens and the person doesn't give up their aspiration, but in other cases they do fall off the path.
다 대지 하고 같이 모래도 왔어. 나로서 이나인 로와 요저 자신 버려 비타 버려 다 니이 소노톤 할레비 샤와 두자 시켰더니 레서나 뇨래 뇨로야 더니 바치 온 거야 알았어.
So this is extremely important for us to know also, right, in our own practice, because we might work really hard to bring forth these important kind of milestones of really cherishing all sentient beings, seeing them as precious, holding them close to ourselves, but then we meet a really difficult or even a seemingly terrible person. And because of that, we get completely discouraged and we give all of that up.
딱 알아서 릴라워도 말했더니 알아서 가제 터터 먼저라 차워도 투요소나 머티 샤와도 머티니데 예 여와시에 도야세가 노론 할레비 같이 모래세가 알았어.
So one of the most important things which we should, as much as possible, really try to keep in our mind is that when we meet such a difficult person, we should try to differentiate between their actions and between the person themselves. Don't conflate those two.
머티 샤왕 양바 까야라 초초를 잡고대서 제일 샤와 받레가 제게야 되니 우용이 요아래더니 대지 고로 타지레마도 세게 니네 머텔 내세냐지요 말했어.
So we see with sort of holy beings that sometimes when dealing with these really difficult people, they will wrathfully interrupt the performing of that negative action. But we have to understand that although that interruption may appear fierce, at the same time, they haven't wandered into aversion for the person engaging in the negativity.
근데 그 수야 저도 순간도 왔어. 어때 때인데서 해요 알았어. 예라. 그래서 나로서 소소로 돼서 오긴도 왔어.
Yeah.
하고서라 내가 두자 제차나 님보 또저도 드릴 거는 샤왕 양바테 밤에 와서 내가 지금도 왔어. 소소도 샤왕 양바니 야와시기도 왔어.
And His Holiness the Dalai Lama has mentioned something really beautiful connected with this point, which is that we can definitely differentiate between those seemingly evil beings and their negative actions, not conflating the action and the person, because we differentiate for ourselves between ourselves and our negative actions. So for example, when we engage in the 4 powers of purification, when we engage in practices of purification, for example, through the 4 powers, we have this understanding we are not those actions, right? So we separate out those actions so we can purify. This shows we can differentiate between the person and the action. So that's really actually a precious oral instruction from His Holiness, and we'll really see that actually that differentiation is definitely something that we're capable of between the person and the action. And also this attitude of humility, because any being that we look at, from the smallest ant to the bird to the earthworm, in our current state we can't point to that being and say, I'm going to reach enlightenment before that being. We don't know that for sure.
So
there are stories that illustrate, about this uncertainty, to be able to say who will reach realization first. So one of these stories is about the great Mahasiddha of a Chakrasamvara lineage. His name is Krishna Charya. It's the one of dark hue. That's actually what his name means, his complexion, right? The one of dark hue. So very great Mahasiddha of the Chakrasamvara lineage. So actually, there's a story that he and his disciple came to a river crossing. And there was a woman of a very kind of poor appearance, very, very haggard looking, maybe even a little bit frightening. Sorry. So she had leprosy, right? So there were missing parts of her limbs and so forth. And she was asking for help to be able to get across. So Krishnacharya's student right away wanted to help her. But Krishnacharya hesitated for a moment. So, dene ko ne jorma drone dene namkala dro parashas. Yeah. So Krishnacharya wasn't so sure that there was any benefit to bringing her across the river. He hesitated a bit. But his student had a different first reaction and said, whether or not I think it's so important for her to get to the other side of the river or not, this is her wish. So I should try to honor the wish of this sentient being. And he took his monk's shawl and kind of, I guess, put her almost like piggybacked her and started to carry her across. And as Krishnacharya was watching them kind of cross, when they got to about the middle of that river, they disappeared from his view. And he was worried. He thought, where did they go? But when he gazed up to the sky, he saw that the woman had transformed into a dakini and was carrying his student in the sky. And so when we go back to this story, right? So the dakini, the imagery is indicating that she also. So the dakini was able to take that disciple of Krishnacharya to pure Dakini land. And so in this story, there's also kind of a karmic reason given for how it unfolded this way, which was related to Krishnacharya's experiences with his previous teacher, Lama Gikalo Mañjuśrī. Then ko nyarchogi mares. So Krishnacharya was, he was reaching high levels in his tantric practice. So he was asking if the time had come to keep a partner, a wisdom mother. And so it is said that he went to his Lama, to his teacher, 3 times. And it is said that he thought about this 3 times. The first 2 times he went to his teacher, and the teacher said that the time is not yet right. So Krishnacharya sort of, reluctantly accepted and left. The 3rd time he decided not to check with his teacher, and he took the wisdom mother. So that transgression of his teacher's advice, it acted as an obstacle for his quick enlightenment, which is connected with that story. However, the scriptures also indicate that it was in his subsequent lifetime, the very next lifetime, that Krishnacharya achieved perfect enlightenment. So this connects with the original comment, which is there's no kind of a bird or earthworm or ant, no matter how small, that we could point to and say with certainty all reach enlightenment before it does. There's also another admonition that says that if we understand sentient beings are the basis which allows us to cultivate love, which allows us to cultivate compassion, which allows us to bring forth bodhicitta, which ultimately allows us to realize Buddhahood, if they're the basis for all those realizations, then how can we offer reverence to the Buddhas and dismiss sentient beings? So in terms of their kindness, actually, it's not like we could say one is more than the other, or their importance in terms of realization. Right? Sentient beings and Buddhas, they're like 50-50 part of this picture. So we can't say that one is kinder than the other. So all of them act as conditions that allow us to cultivate the things necessary to achieve final happiness. So taking away from this conversation, hopefully in your mind, some clarity on where does the activation of the Mahayana lineage actually occur. So being clear on that, and also being clear on when is the Mahayana path actually entered. So we also talked about the different components of this first of the 5 Mahayana paths, which is the path of accumulation. And we said that this path of accumulation is divided into small, middling, and great. And we said the small, the bodhicitta connected with it, is earth-like bodhicitta. The middling is called the gold-like bodhicitta. So gold, compared to earth, it has more stability, because that gold, no matter where we put it, even if it's sort of underneath something dirty like some old rags or something like that, the gold never loses its luster. And that tells us, calling it gold-like bodhicitta indicates that from the point of the path of accumulation middle, one definitely will improve and improve in one's realization. There's no kind of going back or no talk of degeneration once one reaches the middle increment of the path of accumulation of a bodhisattva. Dicen dawa chatsang wa yopadi. So the next type of bodhicitta, it's given as the, what's the best way to say this? The first phase of the waxing moon, right? So not when it's waning, when it's waxing. You just see a crescent there, but it's waxing. So it's going to get more and more full.
다때 코체르체르체르체르는 세바 쫑가 바데 나와트 마데안 로그르로그르 와스.
So from the 1st of lunar month all the way till the 15th, right? It starts with that sliver and it waxes and waxes and waxes until the moon is beautifully full. So the realizations on the path will unfold like that.
때야 자와 숑바가 니도 제가 노는 다테지 지보 지네 순기와 배도 강가자리 유야레스.
And so if you want to learn more about those within the scripture by Maitreya called the Nguntujin, so the Abhisamaya Lamkara, or the Ornament of Clear Realizations, you can find more information in there.
다 딘디서 와세요. 어디 디지던디지레스. 라마노지 템바 용요다 타는 셰바샤 던디지 이장이 던디가. 예.
Yeah.
아니 쇼슈 야쇼 되는 도야가 되는 타 가리나 타 되지 맹화되지 마시기스.
I shall explain the perfect methods taught by spiritual teachers, so understanding what they're seeking, then he's going to teach those methods for reaching that supreme enlightenment for those beings.
이나 던디가 타야 보되지 맹화야 보되지 당 소속 나자마 매봐서 매비 된다. 라마 동비가 맹화라 되는 시기에 맞은 알아 정도 시야 니파데 매나오지.
So we can understand something a little bit from sort of a slightly hidden meaning. I shall explain the perfect methods taught by my spiritual teachers. So here, Atiśa is saying that he's going to explain those perfect methods that will enable one to reach that goal of enlightenment, but taught by spiritual teachers, which means it's not going to be my understanding or my words. It's what other spiritual teachers have already taught that I'm going to share again here. So this is a verse made to diminish pride. It's almost like saying, like Atiśa is saying, like it's not through my own power that I can explain all this, right? It has to be as taught by those other teachers.
조대 어떤 타되어지 다가서 나로고 조져야 되니 많이 이니미자 다 손진이 마주대 내가 강가요 바치 조대고 그래.
It also indicates that this has a source, that this is not something that Atiśa made up newly himself, that actually this is a presentation of the teachings coming down from the Buddha through a chain of realized teachers up to that moment.
오다 뒤지고 같이 뭐래서 오다 뒤지들이 임백했었는데.
So that we finished verse number 6. Geshe was saying now.
오야 저 진짜네 가리 러른 좀 봐셔라 배봐셔.
And so next we will come to our discussion, albeit maybe a brief one, of the Fifth Dalai Lama's oral transmission of Mañjuśrī. And so, in terms of where we are,
조조지지 쇼.
Shojung-chu-chik. Shojung-chu-chik sana nganso kawa du
자이 녀마
jawi ni ma di sure.
대 거로 기게데 게데 게바 반절은 적 있어요. 그래서
Teskuwa.
언제
Sorry.
다리 치는 거 괜찮아.
Yep. Hakosung. So we are on page 13. We're in the sort of bolded verse beginning when the sun of the victor set.
자이 녀마 리녀 접바이 너리 바라샤체 멤비리 샤쇼 산절리테 용저제 케테 근디니에 준게제 토다 바데 게이파 뎀비 돈비 치전제메 뇽발라 조윤도 바시비 온저와 손저 끄진주네 게이시스.
When the sun of the victor set at the western mountain. So this is a praise of Kuntun Pejor Lundrup. When the sun of the victor set at the western mountain, obscured by karma and affliction, you, Lord of Tutors, rose from the eastern mountain of my inferior intellect. Kuntun, friend of the jasmine flower, are the ornament on my crown. Through the glory of your virtue in the beginning, middle, and end, you endlessly bestow the wealth of holy Dharma, and through your mastery of from Mañjuśrī entering your throat, you are the spiritual friend who is the source of the spontaneously accomplished four bodies, or four kayas.
어다 자이 녀마 세레트네 다른 자와 손지 쪼된데데 녀메가 다 주스게 바래 수군이 왔어.
Sung.
아,
Nime.
녀메가 주스게 봐. 빼게 반다고. 다 뒤는 따뜻 소선대와.
Jeje. Ine.
뺀다고 지스게 자니 대돈 잡아다고 녀마.
Nima.
손지대.
Sangegi suk.
내 수지 걸어.
Sangye korang. Nima dandapo. So the victor, the son of the victor, this is comparing the Buddha, the Bhagavan, to the sun.
하고서로 이내전 뼈로세가 뭐도 아주스게 세고 걸어버리게 단다버치 단다그러 so 요새 단에 서서 됐다고 말해 다돼 어느 너를 발라샤체 멤빌리 세레 손이 쪼대데 공부존에 패사라 왔어 만 너버 뭐자와레
So also talking about the setting of this sun, it's sort of indicating that the Buddha passing into parinirvana, in this way it was the setting of the sun.
이나요 어느 자와 그냥 연결되는 패사와레 되는 이나요 하고서라 샤쇼네라 아니 나와샤네라 코로가 라마 게데게 바반조런도 나와샤와 노지 다든지 배네라 뭐 솔직히 땜바자치보다 아지워지소
So through the setting of the sun into the west, it is the Buddha has passed into parinirvana. However, one need not lament, because like the moon rising within the eastern direction, there appears another spiritual teacher. In this case, the great fifth teacher, Kunten Peljor Lundrup.
하고서라 더는 야 케테 건데 세린 다른 그 좋았어 다 된다 되래 하고서라 던디라 때니 다 나와샤와 노지 소지게 땜바자 전부터 지워시네라 아니 소지게 꾸지 공부돼야 내서 차송 들어와서
So although the sun of Buddha Shakyamuni had set from the arising of this moon-like a teacher in the east and his vast activities to benefit beings, the fifth was able to receive the instructions which would allow the accomplishment of the four bodies or kayas.
다 던데 그야 꾸지 공부 더야 다 명화 제키가 다 라마 게데게 바반조는 샤사기
So what it's really saying is, I prostrate to Kunten Peljor Lundrup because on the basis of his instructions, the accomplishment of the four bodies or kayas is possible.
다 그저 센터 가서 깨지냐 뭐지가 하고 살아 왔어 당하로서 자송 지거려 아니 로데 치고 아니 그저서는 원이가 놓고 뜨고
Yeah.
아래 원이가 이시치가 놓고 뜨고 이제 될 그저서가 말했어
So this the four bodies, some of you will already know. It's the Svabhavakaya and the Jnanakaya, the nature truth body and the wisdom truth body, along with the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, and then the Nirmanakaya, the emanation body. So there's different ways of formulating the bodies of a Buddha. This is in four
다
categories.
대제때 양아 다 대제때서 그러와 당하로서 다 도자 다두데 대제들레스
So those four, right, the Swabhavakaya, Jnanakaya, Dharma, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, these are actually our objects of attainment. Ngo nikudang yeshi chuku niga chuku nangla drogire, right? So this Jnanakaya, wisdom truth body, and Svabhavakaya, nature truth body, these both go under that category of truth body or Dharmakaya. So in the formulation of three, those two will go into Dharmakaya.
그래서 다 대제때 가로서 다 손이 타셔서나 대제때 디지도 도용이 말했어
So it is said that the tsukni chatsangwa zone dene.
손이 타셔마가디 좋아서나 대니 대제때 녀도 도용이 말했어
So when the two collections of merit and wisdom have been perfectly accomplished and completed, instantaneously with that, these four kayas or bodies are said to arise.
세노가 초 타셔발레 아니 롱크도 뜨거니 이시가 초 타셔발레 하고서랑 원이거도 더는 이시치거니
So from the completion, and especially connected with the completion of the collection of merit, we have the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, and the Nirmanakaya, the emanation body, and then specifically connected with the conclusion of the collection of wisdom, we have the Jnanakaya, right, which is the wisdom truth body, and the Swabhavakaya, the nature truth body.
다 그제때 원이거도 이시치거니 당기지 라자서 저 치거도 주거니샤 릴라워시나 치거놈으로 그랬어
So the easiest way to talk about the bodies of a Buddha is to divide it into the Rupakaya and Dharmakaya, right? The form body and the truth body. So in that case, these two, right? The wisdom truth body and the nature truth body, the Jnanakaya and Swabhavakaya, these both go in that category of Dharmakaya.
로크도 뜨거니데 주거놈으로 그랬어
And then in that case, also the Sambhogakaya, enjoyment body, and Nirmanakaya, emanation body, go into this broad category of Rupa kaya. So rupa means form body.
어끈이자 니니데 베제도도 니인디와스 아니 치크도 주크세 베제도도지 아니 로데 치크도 때는 예데 주크세는 뭐다다.
And also when we speak about these two bodies, the rupakaya, the form body, and the dharmakaya, the truth body, we talk about rupakaya and dharmakaya. But if we flesh that out a little bit, you'll see often in the scriptures it says the truth body, the dharmakaya, for the welfare of oneself, and the form body, the rupakaya, for the welfare of others.
로켓에 세대지래 세게 tum바니 대지래 더니 나대지래 디와스.
So in terms of what reaches the state of these four bodies, we could speak about it in sort of a three kind of components. Semgi tompani danga seri.
맞아.
The mind, the mind's emptiness, and that we call the I or the self.
세대 이지가 좋아하는 그래.
The mind becomes the wisdom truth body, yeshichoku.
세게 tum바니데 아니 원이가 좋아하는 그래.
The mind's emptiness becomes the nature truth body, the swabhavakaya.
때 나때 로켓도 뜨긴 원로 그래.
And the self becomes these two, the sambhogakaya, enjoyment body, and the manakaya, emanation body.
동보 송지 그래 쪼대 로켓에 때는 로켓에 손지서 파파가 막 손도 그면 있었더니 센지 대 듣기지 우야.
So in terms of kind of reaching the state of enlightenment, in terms of the form body, right? The kind of main achievement is connected with this form body. Gondagi, tambo lonku yongiyores, niga truku yongiyores, mato jenkonso
디지다.
So that sambhogakaya is arising as kind of, in a way, a main form body, but because that sambhogakaya can only be seen by Arya Bodhisattvas and other realized beings, then there has to be this nirmanakaya, this emanation body, to interact with all sentient beings.
다 뜨끈 놀러 리면다와 뭐 요아레스. 조 뜨거 시와 뜨거 추거 뜨거 사나와.
And within nirmanakaya, or emanation bodies, there's different kinds of emanation bodies, like ordinary, extraordinary, and supreme emanation bodies.
다 추거 뜨거 세나 다 대지 질레스. 추거 뜨거 세나.
Loso. Jela sana? Chogi sana perna tak dang gendin so.
어제 간거 수지 조된데 더블 배운 거 왔어. 정말 손징어만 이렇게 들어서 왔어.
Loso. And so actually, it's interesting that in terms of the timeline of this, the Supreme Nirmanakaya or emanation body comes a little bit later. So the Supreme Nirmanakaya or emanation body means engaged in having all of the marks and signs, so like the Ushnisha, the crown protrusion, the Dharma chakra wheel in the palms and so forth. So it is actually said that one comes a little bit later. So Buddha Shakyamuni, in the Mahayana presentation, he achieved enlightenment long ago. And then when his time came to be the main Buddha of this world, he arrived in the form as this Supreme emanation body.
학고기 쪼지라 아니 로데 드게요 바다 로데 타심 비자니 로데 지거 예데 타심 비자니 예데 주거 되게 거지도 왔어.
And another important thing for us to hear and understand here is also when we talk about the dharmakaya for one's own welfare and the rupakaya for the welfare of others, it's really dharmakaya for the supreme welfare of oneself, rupakaya to work for the supreme welfare of others. It's that welfare, that benefit in the supreme sense.
타민 리벌 든딘 리벌 소속 된다 앞에서 두바지 용거 요나 저드비가 안에 소속 된다 더 용거 요.
Yeah, and so if you want to have this exceptional result at the completion of the path, it means from now, from this very moment, we need to be accumulating excellent causes. That's very important.
손질은 로야가 정고주 그러는 소식 된다 야쇼 정고주 용거 요 때니 드네 정가서 레치가 제다 된다 마든 간스 된다 요사 말을 되기로 왔어.
Right, and so like when we're kind of traveling through the Bodhisattva path and so forth, accumulating these causes, these are actually the causes of our own complete and perfect enlightenment. But because many of them are accumulated in conjunction with sentient beings, we might mistakenly think, well, I'm doing all this stuff for others. Well, what am I getting out of it? Well, hello, you're accumulating the causes for your own enlightenment, so that's what you're getting.
로데가 된다 야쇼지 드게요 바다 다 하고는 드게로 왔어.
You're actually working not only for your own welfare or benefit, but for the supreme benefit or welfare of yourself.
오야 공개 너가 틀레스제지 레시 다이 마마라지 렌데시 페데르지 온게자 세지 어포시 체저케 제와 ngaji pini 마메제 야세 만디초와 레고 네즈 포도셴가 노스치 돈비 다 출력지만 놓으면 겨나
Kangi namkar chinle
Yeah, shulokji.
sisegi droso.
출력지
Yeah, so we're going to do the next one. which is another to one of the great fifth teachers, his main tutor. So this is on page 14. We'll just read the first shloka or verse of this. The cool moon rays of your white deeds cause the ocean of eloquent speech to swell, from which comes the wish-fulfilling jewel. From which comes the wish-fulfilling, I guess Geshe wants me to read faster. From which comes the wish-fulfilling jewel of well-being in current and future lives you bestow to eliminate destitution in samsara and nirvana.
다 가르친 거 요래 산다네 레시 다임 마마스긴데 와서 마마스는 자솔 쓰기요레스.
So yeah, 인지낭고나 잠소세기래죠. Yeah, so there's mama rebe.
Yeah.
So there's a word in Tibetan marmar which indicates ocean, which is usually given as gyatso, or jamso. So that Geshe is just explaining that this means ocean, mama, but actually it says ocean in the English. So it's connected with, and Geshe has heard that when people who do like long ocean voyages, they'll experience this, that when the kind of the moonlight shines on the surface of the ocean, that those moon rays are kind of cooling.
단다이나 세침에 제바 쫑아도 제바 제도 제바 zon아 되르질 다와시 아포야이자 자소 마다와지 가세요.
And also it's said that actually the shining of the moon, especially as it reaches its kind of full waxing phases, this kind of gradual increasing, that this also affects the ocean currents and tides and so forth.
어때 저항아와 코로가 기기 개대게 바반조런도 당기 녜레 도차로 왔어. 어다 디게다네 다와샤와 노지 그 절레데 바지리에 그딜라. 아니 다 보게 소소르게 야가 다 보게 예대 강가다.
Yeah, so the Dalai Lama, the fifth Dalai Lama here is comparing his teacher to that moon, which is swelling the oceans, in this case an ocean of enlightened activity, which is like a wish-fulfilling jewel for the well-being of sentient beings. So to eliminate the destitution in samsara and nirvana, this means to help them avoid the two extremes of peace, so that's liberation for oneself, and existence, cyclic existence, or samsara. So on the basis of those instructions, the great fifth was able to unmistakably enter the path and cultivate the path of the bodhisattvas. So thank you very much. We shall end it here. So we are just after that first paragraph in bold on page 14. So with a very happy mind, then all of us should sort of dedicate and so forth our integration, our accumulation of merit on the path here. Changjo Sanjo Rinpoche Maje Bana Jejo Reji Chewa Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gondu Pewa Risho Tongni Tawa Rinpoche Maje Bana Jejo Reji Cheba Nyamba Meba Yang Gone Gondu Pewa Jambe Pao Jedar Kimba Tang Kundu Zambo Deyon Deje Deda Kungi Jesu Dalojo Gewa Deda Tangje Radango Dezun Shebe Gyawa Tangje Ngawa Gangla Chodo Ngawa De Dagi Gewe Zawan de Gyon Azambo Jeji Radongowa.
Je kan gikita giyosa bini patela tene. 아니 로아리 주센지 설리나 리지 강에 센지 강에 가 요나 강가 봐 저바샤와는 주바셨네라다 기부기 쇼르도 와지.
So then, through the power of the virtuous karma that we have accumulated, may all of the physical and mental sufferings experienced by all 6 types of sentient beings be completely cleared away and eradicated, just like snow in a warm rain. May they all be able, through these merits, to accumulate the causes of that perfect happiness, which particularly is the mind of loving kindness. And through these merits, may all of my negative karma and obstacles be purified, so that I may accomplish realizations and progress on the path exactly as I wish. So think I've been able, through these activities, at least in a small way, to put an imprint for the Bodhisattva path within my mind stream. I should joyfully rejoice. So we'll pause there. So if you need to get on with your Sunday, please do. If not, you're very welcome to stay for questions. So whoever would like to ask. I don't know if I'm need to adjust my volume or if folks are just shy today.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I
can you hear?
Yeah,
Yeah, they hear. I'll go check streaming. We've got a little bit of trouble with streaming text, so I'll have to go check individually.
Yeah, no problem.
Let you know.
Geshe is worried about his hay fever during the class today, but it wasn't bad. Yeah,
no.
Geshe gets really bad hay fever this time of year.
Nothing really from Facebook that I can
Nothing
see.
from Facebook. And YouTube, it's hard to see them sometimes.
Yeah, it takes a while for them to show up.
Would
If there are
anybody
no
on
questions,
Zoom
I
like
have
to-
one, if possible.
Oh, please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, thank you. I know that I should know it, but I find it difficult to comprehend. If Geshe could just repeat the division, the mind's emptiness is the nature truth body, the mind, I can't remember, and the self is the Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya. I found that challenging.
No, I think other people will definitely appreciate you asking this, Sylvia. I kind of know it now, but I used to stumble on this one because, it's hard to conceptualize. So I'll ask Geshe to share that again. No
Thank
problem.
you.
Yeah. Nganso ngama Geshe di kuji nganso semgi tompani dang da seria de la tene kurere chungwa yoresti younger sundong ko di younger sundong.
Ya ta nga sa te nga te zo long ke ta no ro was.
Longku.
Zo de.
Yeah.
Ani te do nyon do la ta zo sa na de te ne te do nyon do la zwa ji wu yong ya de ke sa ji.
Loso.
Nyon do res.
Loso. So in terms of Sylvia's question, so that we call the I, or we could say the self, this upon enlightenment transforms into the Sambhogakaya, which is the enjoyment body. And it's instantaneous, but we still say it emanates, and the enjoyment body emanates the Nirmanakaya, or emanation body. So we could connect the enjoyment body, the Sambhogakaya, and the Nirmanakaya, the emanation body, to that we call the I, or the self. So that's the first part of the picture. And also to understand that the Nirmanakaya in particular, the emanation bodies are something not static. So there's one that's kind of at that moment of enlightenment, but this Nirmanakaya body is something that is kind of changing in accordance. That's kind of changing and transforming in accordance with the needs of sentient beings. It's said that the Sambhogakaya is a little bit more static in the sense that the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body, abides gonda nganso korwa pet zoya.
야 가마도 빠도 거로 되게들 거로 체지지 예대지래서.
Yeah, so the quality of the Sambhogakaya or enjoyment body, it remains abiding in that form until samsara is emptied of sentient beings, basically, until the end of samsara.
소지도 되는 좀을 배우를 로그지 또 말해 돼요. 했다.
And so we can understand that the Buddha
야.
so that we can understand Buddha Shakyamuni as a supreme emanation body emanated from a Sambhogakaya. We could think about it in that way. But both the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya are connected with the I, or the self.
그런이네 그때 로켓 가와야서 오만 그냥
Ogmin. And so if you ask, well, where is Buddha Shakyamuni's Sambhogakaya enjoyment body? It is in the Pure Land of Ogmin, which I believe Ogmin is Akanishta. It's a Pure Land called Akanishta in Sanskrit.
로켓은 콜 쇼지서 뭐 봐봐도
And the reason for this, once again, is that in terms of the Sambhogakaya, right, that can only be seen by Arya Bodhisattvas and realized beings. It can't be seen by ordinary beings.
다 로켓 되게 대치우 대체가 지금 맛이 마도 대명이 다 대치되는 순간이야 말했어.
And this idea of this idea of the Sambhogakaya or the enjoyment body, this is something that you'll find in the Mahayana teachings. So you won't find it in the Shravakayana teachings, like you won't find it in the teachings of the Theravada tradition.
다 이나 뜻끝에라 다 지대적이 대명이 지송지가 강가순 거 왔어.
But in terms of the Nirmanakaya, the emanation bodies that are interacting with sentient beings on the earth and turning the wheel of the teaching and so forth, this is something, that emanation body of the Buddha is accepted by all Buddhist traditions. And no, jena niden so drosunda nganso di chukudi.
야 대도 세대
Yeah.
이시지가.
Yeah.
이시지가.
Yeah.
대만이 나로서 매도 노지 다 도끼때라 이시지가 세요레스.
And so then Geshe was saying we're done, but I was like, no, I think we still have to say the mind and the mind's emptiness. So the mind, this is semseryadi.
이시지가.
The mind becomes the Jnanakaya, the wisdom truth body, and in particular we see Dempani Nyamdu Tong Tubya Gisem.
demban이 디세지라 내 노지다 거로보게 다 도끼지라 마노.
And in this sense we can define mind as the mind that in one moment, as clearly as Geshe sees that flower on his table, is able to perceive the two truths of one object simultaneously. That mind is the wisdom truth body, the Jnanakaya or the Jnanakaya Dharmakaya.
손지
Sorry,
셈바
yeah.
손지 셈바 파파체 토벌레 그데 파팔레 그데라 demba 레레 된데 노지다 도요레스. demban이 디지데 됐다 도요 말레스.
So when a being becomes an Arya Bodhisattva, they're able to perceive the relative and ultimate truth of any object, for example, that flower, but they're not able to perceive it simultaneously in exactly the same moment.
하고서 어다 대이자 시저 세계도스 demban이 디지데 노지다 토케달 까게텔라. 저바이자 시저.
Yeah, and so this is also connected with what we call the wisdom or knowledge obscurations, because one is blocked from being able to see the relative and ultimate truth of an object in that same moment. That is a knowledge or a wisdom obscuration. Sometimes this is translated as obscuration to omniscience, which I think is nice too. It gives another angle.
때 같이 뭐지 그러다스 너가 니까를 지발했을
Yeah, and this holds in both the presentations of Sutra and Tantra.
하고서 저도 문다와 뭐 요할 때때 지발해 되어레스.
Yeah, so in Sutra and Tantra sometimes we see some difference, but on this appointment they are in accord. On this point they are in accord.
하고서 메모도 뭐 원래 용 그럴 때는 저 시저세나 대세니까.
So Shinjip, wisdom obscuration, is understood the same in Sutra as in Tantra. Dening also sengi tongpani jomaso.
다 세계 뚱반이 돼. 세계 뚱반이 단단한 줄로 요하라 왔어.
Yeah.
다 콜로버 저마르지 파타 좀마되는
Yeah.
저바 강가 다서는 공원이 그 좋아서.
And then finally we come to the mind's emptiness. And so the mind's emptiness, when it is completely free of any adventitious defilements, purified of all obscurations, that mind's emptiness within these four bodies, it becomes the Swabhava Kaya, the nature truth body.
하고서 다
Okay. And that is the supreme true cessations, the supreme liberation, the attainment. Is that okay, Sylvia? Did that answer?
Yes, thank you very much. It's just very difficult to the mind's emptiness becoming something, because I would tend to make it concrete. So it's quite challenging to grasp. But thank you very much. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah, kochena di sengi tompani chik chaya yores. Dites kavores karinsena tompani kandisla gure chik chagire sanlo tana senla tes debo mendu da.
Yeah, maybe ta kochala ta chimbo yamba kick.
So instead of thinking of it changing into something else, just think that it is kind of so just think of it as like a diamond which is maybe covered by some soil, and through this process of enlightenment a rain has fallen and that diamond is revealed. Sylvia, you could think of it like that.
Thank you. Wonderful.
There's an example too given in the Uttara Tantra Shastra, the Sublime Continuum. So that's that treatise on Buddha nature. It's the example that's given is a Buddha statue beneath a pile of rags. So that also kind of brings forth that idea. So we take each rag away, and slowly then the Buddha is revealed. So I think we're okay with Sylvia's question then. Would anyone else like to ask something? Oh, Dave, do you have something from the socials? No. People are quiet on social. That's unusual. So Geshe said no problem. If there's no more questions, we
Carol has a question. Carol.
Oh yeah, Carol, go ahead. Carol, yes.
Thank you so much for all this. I think sometimes we don't say anything because we're just digesting. And so I wanted to kind of check at what point do we really never lose bodhicitta?
Yes, okay, yes, no, we'll ask that. And yes, no, when we ask for questions, it's not like pressure. So if you like, don't feel pressure, but it's also like just, wanting to make sure that everyone who asks a question get a question, but don't feel like you have to ask a question or Kadrup's going to punish you or something. It's not like that. Nanso triwa usu jagidu, konso sam sungshidi tes jugogire to us. Rokonana jugogi to us, just explaining what you said to Geshe. Yeah, so So Carol, you're asking about at which point on the paths does bodhicitta become irreversible? You want to confirm that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Nanso jangchu gisem nyamya ginyenga pet mepachai tutsu di kadures tsoklam jingjing. So the path of accumulation is divided into small, middling, and great. It's when you're on this middling path of accumulation, the bodhicitta cannot degenerate.
Thank you. That gives some hope. Thank you.
Yeah, once you get to that first step, it's pretty quick after that. So yeah, but of course we have to put in the effort. Yeah. Oh, we do see two. I see two yellow hands on the screen, so I'm not sure. Okay, Marta, and then I think it's Robert. Yeah, go ahead, Marta.
Good day, Venerable Geshe and Kedrupla. I have two. Please let me do two. Okay, first one. Buddhists encourage people to reach a state that is not easy to understand because of the ego that only believes in its own reality. It will be entering the path by pure faith. It will be like someone who has born sick and to whom it is explained that at some point or in another life, they can enjoy a healthy state, and that the door to enter that state is the development of the desire to benefit others. But a person, the egoist, cannot understand that others need something. How can an egoist take the first step to enter even the state of a being, of a person of inferior capacity.
가슴.
Okay. I want to turn my volume up, and then I'm sorry, Marta, I'm going to have to ask you to ask it again, because it was quite long, and I heard the last part. How can a person enter even this step of inferior capacity? But I didn't understand the part before that. So I'm sorry. Can you say it again? Yeah. And Geshe said try to abbreviate. Yeah. No, I know I understand English is not your first language. I wish I knew Spanish. I really do. It's a very useful language to know, but no problem. Just try again. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Buddhism encourages people to reach a state that is not easy to understand because of the ego that only believes in its own reality. It will be entering the path maybe just by pure faith. It will be like someone who has born sick and to whom it is explained that at some point or in another life, they can enjoy a healthy state. And the door to enter that state is the development of the desire to benefit others.
Right.
But a person, the egoist, cannot understand even that others need something. How can an egoist take the first step to enter even the state of a being, of a person of an inferior capacity?
Yes, thank you, Marta. Okay, I think I got the gist of your question now. Dene nganso nangsha gi nanglolaya nganso leb manyong gi gopang chik leb tubgi res rwa ane di soso tong manyongya gi gopang chik samlo tangna tets kale kapo re duas di kale kapo chik rwa ane di sena nepa hale pe chempo yena rwa soso amane kiewa nepa chempo yana rwa soso pet natsa mepa droya gi gopang chikyoris ko nyamyong di metsang ko kelenya tes kale kapore duas ane yang nganso sange gi gopang tobya di nganso yen gi kandeslagore penyon chea gi chedu gi samso chik gogires dene mi nepa chik soso gi dondak chikpo dangzin shuk chempo yogen sangye gi lam dang gorim tambodi kebu chungu yinayang kandes chik drogoresa.
메메다 네바 쳔보지 이나요. 다 가디 이나 가 강에레 nga 지레서 소노 또 되는 가디 이나 강에 두른 도야마도 배도만도 와스.
So to connect with Marta's first analogy, if you have a sick person who is only thinking of their sickness, who has no conception of themselves as healed or getting better, the sickness is going to go on and on and on.
다 이나요 세 베게테에서 somba 그용바냐. 세 그용바 세 자침보냐니 다 거로버게 som바다고 소노 또 니진다고 소노 또 드니 길레키지나. 그rol래 여보서 맞젠데리 이나이 그용바 데레레 요아와스.
But if you can get them to open for a vaster mind, beyond the suffering of their current situation, you can see that based upon a sick person bringing forth love and compassion, that can actually be the path to healing. And it's in the same case as what you call the egoist, or what I would say is the person with strong self-grasping. And we can see with this analogy of the sick person, and therefore certainly with the egoist, right? Of course, it depends on the individual case and their previous karma and so forth. But we can see that there are people who were extremely sick, bedridden even, who through bringing forth love and compassion were able to heal themselves and certainly take the first step towards practicing the small scope.
Yeah.
So you know, to such a person, sometimes these concepts, they get too big, right? So you could explain to such a person that really the object of attainment is a state of freedom from all faults and all that troubles us. So the first step towards reaching there is just trying to reduce our faults. Even if we're just doing that for ourselves, that's the first step.
하고서 세계 시라 때는 무슨 네가 강해 시와 지미 강해 거의 여러 강가 세계 시라 때는 여기 알았어요.
And we know that faults, right, in terms of our experiences in this lifetime, in terms of the experience that will be difficult in future lifetimes, they are the cause of all of that. So once someone has committed to the reduction of faults, they've already like kind of taken that first step that you mentioned, Martha.
모보소노 또 가마르 빼는 간주 무슨으로 그야기 쇼바도 했더니 하고서라와 쇼바도 군론일 빼잖아. 사와도 중앙으로 지래 돼요.
And we know that as you develop more positive qualities, the faults have less space to arise within the mind. It's compared to like the heating and the air conditioning when you have in your house. If we compare the air conditioning to the love, when the air conditioning is turned on, love, the opposite to anger, anger has less space to fill, less space to take hold. The heat can't get through.
다 쇼바테 자치르 뭐지 니다 가제 이나 다 모르는 돈이 가제 자침보 코로 야보 차소나 다 콘도테 마추르 줄코 니빠 녀로로 왔어.
So basically what we're doing is by extending our love or compassion. So first we love a couple of people, those close to us. We extend that to 3 people, 4 people, more and more beings. As that love reaches more and more beings, that anger has less and less and less and less of a surface from which it can manifest.
하고서
Yeah.
다 콘도테 니바 메바 차사서 토자 무엇이 그만 토자.
So once that field of love and that those sentient beings who are the basis of that field of love gets big enough, there's no room that anger can intrude anymore. It's kind of like a natural consequence of that.
다와 토서 나왔더니 지세기 얼마 연다 깨지시기 얼마 다스 된다.
And you can speak of that as a kind of liberation or emancipation, can't you?
하고서 다 콘도 당아자 코로스 레카메 와서도서나 당아조 가디나 롱토 바르 타와레스.
And if we've created through these beneficial minds this kind of vast surface of benefit, and anger, pride, and other afflictions don't have any fertile ground where they can sprout, isn't that kind of like a sort of liberation or emancipation?
타와 동송지도 제는 비코로 메이티다 코른다 말을 타그레 마탄다 데려와서 세시 버레스.
So we use these words like Buddhahood, like individual liberation, like liberation, and so forth. But sometimes when we think of them using an image or an example, it's easier to conceptualize.
어떻게 못 와서 왔을 텐데 빼는 네바지나 영아조 다 보기 그 렌데도 때는 샤왕 아셔도 되지 길에는 계속 먹어요.
Yeah. So for this egoist, but also for this sick person, we can see that in terms of them taking that first step towards the small scope, if they can understand that karma, that the teachings on cause and effect will give them some insight into their personal situation and maybe even a path to improve it, that's a first step.
뭐센데 찌보마도 면에 세 가지나 자치 뭐냐게 하더니 다 대절 쇼마도 니지가 배도 여봐 하거나 다는 올 거래와지 하러 왔어.
And even just beyond that, the next scope, even if they're just holding that this is the only life and that's it. They're not holding like past and future lifetimes. If they're able to think about love and compassion a little bit and to make their mind just a little bit vaster, then isn't that kind of like approaching that next scope a little bit?
빼는 간좀미 도살아 자가 거러고 누가 말해 그 누이 치키래고 말아 왔어.
So,
자가지 아래서 미그 내바치 미그 못도키지.
los.
아까 달래게 내바치.
Yeah.
와도 라바강가 치야사키지 접세라.
Los.
다 그거 또 뭐치는 동거 말했어. 이나 다른 자와를 진짜 로저도 싫어 먼저 기대 잘래게 선바 좀 보까지. 건저거 좀 와서로 제 가디 이나 걸 오만 빼면 호대지 라네. 기 가디 이나 사타만 거미 두기 자서 왔겠지.
So, Geshe recollects the case of a man with terrible leprosy who used to beg at Sera Monastery. And in fact, the leprosy was so terrible that he was blinded. And so while he was there, some of the monks, and it's not always necessarily the scholarly monks that are giving the most compassionate help, right? It was some of the simple monks, right? They were walking by this man every day, and so they taught him to recite Om Mani Padme Hum. And they told him that, if he wanted to get alms, better for him to recite Om Mani Padme Hum instead of something else. And actually, from reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum over and over and over for many weeks and a few years, eventually that man's sight was restored, and he was able to kind of go on to a better life, no longer having to beg at the monastery. And how do we describe this power? Is that the power of like faith, or is that something else? Like that man might not even have been a Buddhist, but he had that kind of benefit. So maybe too much of a conversation, but hopefully some of Martha's question got answered.
I have another. Lama, please let me. There are some people with whom I have had conflicts. Like a neighbor in the other house, and then my ego has been upset. And when I meet that person on the road, on the street, I have unrelated feelings and thoughts towards them.
What kind of thoughts, Marta? I can't hear.
Also, like unrelated, not good. Like, oh, here she is again.
Right. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And then I feel that my bodhisattva vows degenerate, and so what
okay.
do I do when I see these people? Because I just saw her, and it's like, ooh, and then, ooh, what can I do?
Yeah. I got you. Okay. Nanso ko sam mi dang kange yopagi mi den so perna morangi kimse rwa morangi kimse dang mi tunpa mambo cha sons dene chilo la jodi mo mi tong sam la tene. Oh, iko yangar tugures komi chik dukchares dene sem nangla samso duksha mambo chik lagires dene di jangshub sempe gi dompa tes nyam jogere duas dene mi denso dabo tupe kapola kande samlo tang yarge kandes chik tangoresa.
Tate tangi ke jamoshi aswas shawadu koroni de yawashikare ni je kola ronya mares.
Yeah.
Hakosarawa to shawadu dujares kazeta ta.
So Geshe would connect it with something he shared earlier in the lesson, Marta, which is to differentiate, to see that the person and their actions are not the same. And the way that you can do this is you think, the poor thing, him or her, right? Poor guy, poor woman. They, are under the control of the afflictions. They don't have control over their actions and reactions. And by thinking in that way, you're separating him or her from the action that they're engaging in, understanding that because of the afflictions, they don't have freedom over their behavior. That might help.
So sel no to jinya tani kunto sa tezona kunto le pe le yoga chaswa mato.
Yeah.
강에 저거.
Yeah.
요저거 저거.
Yeah.
le yoga tere mato kol 강에 뉴르도 야 타 말에 스탠다. 윤조 kunto sa no to techena.
And also just understanding, which Geshe thinks you've done already, actually, by asking this, which is that, like, if, because of my thinking, my false thinking about this person and kind of ruminating, so ruminating, that's a funny word, like to think about something over and over, and if getting angry was going to somehow solve the conflict with that person, okay, but no, just getting angry just kind of perpetuates the negative karma, right? Controlana deni duru. Anger is actually not going to help you to defeat that person in any way. In fact, in many cases, it might make you kind of more illogical, and at a very minimum, you're cultivating more negative karma. So anger doesn't even have the benefit of being able to defeat your opponent, really. So it's not beneficial in this case. So another way to approach this, Marta, in your free time, when like kind of you're relaxed, not when you're in the heat of the situation, is to think like, okay, like is anger going to be something that's going to benefit, or it's going to make this situation worse? And like, what are the drawbacks of getting angry here? And what would it be like if I tried to be patient What would the possible outcomes be like if I tried to be patient? And that might help you.
지체 치 소노도 지체니 소노도 tene lu sono도 ya ran lung
Lung.
konto di chayima zeba ya boyima.
So, think about those reasons. And also, if we look at the point of view of the Vajrayana, right, when we're angry, this disturbs the winds very much, right? So that's also not good from that perspective.
하고서 that region 가정만 안주 뭐지 디퍼겠냐 로지 뭐시야 자임
Yeah. And so Geshe also said, think about the story he told previously about that meditator, right, who had to come down into Dharamsala, and he would meet that guy that he didn't like, and at first he couldn't even walk down the same path, and then he was able to walk past him but not say hello, and gradually, so it's a gradual process.
나와 가신 곳은 타마 테는 얘네 프로 라바토네 같이 타니 인지민지 타니 저도 가마르와.
So after a few months, he was even able to take this person's hand and have a friendly conversation with him, right? But of course, this happens incrementally over time. Yeah. But initially, his reaction was just like that, like with your neighbor, right? Like if you saw him on a path, he would want to go in the other direction. Didn't even want to see the person. Yeah, so it's like that. I think then we've... Oh, yeah, no, you're welcome, Marta. You're welcome. Take care. Anybody else?
Yes, Robert had a question. Go ahead, Robert.
Yes, Robert, go ahead.
There we go. My phone doesn't have much charge, but I'll try to make it quick. My question would be maybe a long answer. So I just want to say thank you so much for the teachings. I'll ask my question next week. This has been extremely helpful for me in my path. A lot of what Lama Yeshe has gone over, especially the path on the lamp of enlightenment, has answered a lot of questions involving the Kayas and a lot of my experience. And I'm just so very grateful from the very bottom of my heart for all sentient beings. And I'll ask my question next week.
Okay, no, thank you, Robert. And I'm sorry the charge on your phone, but yes, do write your question down, and we'll get to it next week. I'll share your thank you with Geshe, and thanks so much for sharing that. It's always nice to know that things benefit. Tu nang semtine gabu ko tanda ko phone gi kandes battery medro gi duas. Then they len picture ko du samares in a semtine gabu jones sungshu di nangne halepe tuje ches ane lamgi netso mambochik ane sange gi kudin so yewa chetong halepe sebo chasons tuje nang shugyosa. Yeah, so Geshe, thanks you. And yes, please write down your question and we'll get to it next time. And we'll just let everyone else get on with their day. So thank you very much for joining us, everybody.
Yeah, take care all.